The world has seen many criminals, but one man in Colombia was in a league of his own. He wasn't just dangerous, he was powerful, worshipped like a hero by many. His money? It was so much that counting it was useless. Instead, his men weighed it. Can you believe they spent $1,000 every week just on rubber bands to tie the cash? And when he was sent to jail, it wasn't an ordinary prison. No, he built his own prison and lived there on his terms. This wasn't just any criminal. This was the king of cocaine, Pablo Escobar. Where Pablo grew up. As a child, he dreamed of becoming a lawyer, then a politician. He even aimed to be president one day. But as he grew older, his mindset changed. He realized that real power didn't come from politics. It came from money. If you had money, you could control anyone, even lawyers and politicians. His belief in money grew stronger when his family's financial struggles forced him to leave school. He made a bold decision. He would get rich at any cost. If he didn't earn 1,000,000 pesos by 25, he would end his life. Now Pablo wanted to become rich as quickly as possible. His hunger for money became an obsession, pushing him deeper into crime. Along with his cousin Gustavo Gaviria, he started with small illegal jobs, selling fake diplomas, smuggling sound equipment, and even stealing tombstones to resell. But small crimes couldn't make him rich fast enough. So, he took a bigger step. Before turning 20, he started stealing cars and kidnapping wealthy people. He made a fortune by selling stolen car parts and demanding ransom. If the victim's family refused to pay, he didn't hesitate to kill them. Sometimes, even after getting the ransom, he still killed them to spread fear. In 1971, he kidnapped industrialist Diego Echevarria. Despite receiving $10,000, Pablo had him killed. His crimes kept growing, and by 22, he became a millionaire. But with power came problems. The police were now after him. And in 1974, Pablo was first time arrested for car theft. The prison didn't break Pablo. It only made him smarter. Instead of fearing the system, he found ways to control it. He bribed the police, made powerful connections, and kept his business running from behind bars. Money was his only goal, and he was willing to do anything to get it. He had stolen, kidnapped, and even killed for wealth. But when he discovered the cocaine trade, everything changed. In the 1970s, Colombian drug traffickers were making millions smuggling cocaine into the US. Pablo saw this as his golden opportunity. At first, he worked for powerful drug lords, learning smuggling routes and making strong connections. But he knew real power came from leading, not following. In 1975, he made his move. He had Medellin's biggest cocaine trafficker, Fabio Ochoa Restrepo, killed. His men were given one choice: work for Pablo or face the same fate. From that moment, his rise to power was unstoppable. The next year, 1976, brought major changes in Pablo Escobar's life. He wasn't just making money, he was building an empire. That year, he joined forces with the Ochoa brothers, Carlos Lader, and José Gonzalo Rodríguez Gacha to create the Medellin Cartel. Their business wasn't small-scale theft anymore. It was full-scale cocaine production and smuggling. Pablo took charge, using his connections with drug producers, expert smugglers, and corrupt officials to grow the cartel. Moving cocaine required creativity, and Pablo was always one step ahead. He hid drugs in car tires, stuffed them inside TV sets, and even packed them into fish stomachs. Sometimes he smuggled cocaine using filling them and hiding them in secret compartments. But one of his most effective methods was using airplanes. He paid pilots enormous amounts to transport cocaine in the tires of their planes. As money poured in, Pablo expanded even further. He bought submarines and aircraft to smuggle drugs from Colombia to the US through Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. The profits were unbelievable. But despite being surrounded by drugs, Pablo never used cocaine himself. This made his partners trust him even more. They knew he wasn't addicted to his own product. He was focused on business. While running his empire, Pablo also made a personal decision. In March 1976, he married Maria Victoria Henao. She was just 15 years old, 11 years younger than him. But success came with risks. On June 9, 1976, Colombian intelligence agents raided Pablo's car and found 40 pounds of cocaine hidden in the tires. He and 6 of his men were arrested. Most criminals would panic, but Pablo had other plans. He had already learned how to control people. Inside jail, he bribed police officers, judges, and lawyers. Those who refused to cooperate were threatened. Within no time, he walked free. Once out, he sent a brutal message. He hunted down and killed the 2 agents responsible for his arrest. This was when he introduced his infamous rule, plata o plomo, silver or lead. Either take his money and work with him, or refuse and face death. With so much money flowing, Pablo Escobar's cartel began buying land like it was nothing. One of their biggest purchases was Norman's Cay Island in the Bahamas. This wasn't just any island, it was the perfect smuggling hub. They built a 1-kilometer-long airstrip, a harbor, and several houses. They even added a refrigerated warehouse to store cocaine before shipping it out. With this setup, Norman's Cay became the heart of the Medellin cartel's drug operation. Pablo's strategy was working fast. His cocaine was flooding into America, Mexico, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and Spain. He was no longer just a major player. He was the player. Every week, he was making a mind-blowing $420 million. That kind of money put him in a league of his own. And soon, people started calling him the King of Cocaine. With this massive fortune, Pablo didn't just buy luxuries, he built an empire. He had private planes, helicopters, exotic cars, and massive properties. But his most extravagant creation was his Medellin estate. It spanned 7,000 acres and was worth $63 million. It had a private airport, heliport, soccer fields, 6 swimming pools, artificial lakes, and even a bullfighting arena. But what really made it stand out was his personal zoo, filled with wild animals from around the world. For Pablo, money meant power. He could get whatever he wanted with just a single command. He had earned so much that even his future generations wouldn't need to work. But for him, power was more addictive than money. He wasn't satisfied with just being a drug lord. He wanted political power. To win over the people, he invested in public welfare. He built houses, hospitals, schools, churches, parks, and stadiums for the poor. His generosity turned him into a Robin Hood-like figure in the eyes of many. With public support growing, Pablo took the next step. He ran for a seat in the Colombian parliament. And in November 1982, he won. People were shocked. How did Colombia's biggest criminal become part of the government? But for Pablo, this was just the beginning. With political backing, his drug business ran smoother than ever. By this point, 80% of the world's cocaine trade was in his hands. His next goal? Becoming the president of Colombia. But there was a problem. His criminal record was too big to ignore. His enemies were waiting for the right moment, and soon, Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla exposed his crimes to the world. The newspaper El Espectador published a full report on Pablo's drug empire, making it impossible for him to hide anymore. Fear, bribery, and power had protected him for years, but being in politics brought too much attention. He saw that his wealth was at risk, so in January 1984, he resigned from his seat and stepped away from politics. But Pablo didn't forgive or forget. In a brutal act of revenge, he ordered the assassinations of Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla and the editor of El Espectador. Pablo Escobar's crimes were becoming a nightmare for the Colombian government. His power had grown so much that arresting him seemed impossible, but the authorities had to take action. An arrest warrant was issued, forcing him into hiding. To make things worse for him, Colombia signed an extradition agreement with the United States, meaning drug traffickers like him could be sent to America for trial. Pablo knew escaping in Colombia was easy, but if he ended up in an American prison, there would be no way out. To avoid this, he made an offer. He would surrender only if he was kept in a Colombian jail and not handed over to the US. The government refused. Seeing no other way, he took things further. He offered to pay off Colombia's $10 billion debt in exchange for canceling his extradition, but the government didn't accept. When words didn't work, Pablo turned to violence. He formed Los Extraditables, targeting officials who supported extradition. He even funded the M-19 guerrillas, who attacked the Colombian Supreme Court in 1985, killing judges and burning legal documents, including extradition papers. Pablo had declared war on his own country, but his troubles were far from over. Time kept moving, but nothing stopped. Neither Pablo Escobar's violence nor the extradition agreement. By the time 1989 arrived, the world was witnessing shocking numbers. One number was Pablo Escobar's net worth, $25 billion, making him the seventh richest person in the world. The other, the countless murders he ordered. No one knew the exact number, but everyone knew one thing. He wasn't just wealthy, he had turned Colombia into a battlefield. That year, his cartel carried out over 100 bombings across cities like Bogota, Medellin, Cali, and Barranquilla. Hundreds lost their lives, and fear spread like wildfire. Killing wasn't just part of his business anymore. It had become second nature. Now, even presidential candidates were in his crosshairs. In August 1989, he ordered the assassination of Luis Carlos Galan, Colombia's leading candidate for president. Then in November 1989, he targeted Cesar Gaviria by bombing Avianca Flight 203. Over 100 innocent people were killed, but Gaviria survived. He had missed the flight and later became Colombia's president. And that only fueled the war between Pablo and the government. There was a war between Escobar and the government. Escobar placed bounties on police officers, offering gangsters huge rewards for every officer they killed. Meanwhile, the Colombian forces struck back, killing his cousin Gustavo Gaviria and Rodriguez Gacha, his cartel's second-in-command. Hundreds of his men were captured, but Pablo refused to back down. In 1991, Colombian authorities finally gave in to his terror. They revoked the extradition law, preventing criminals from being sent to the United States. But Escobar wanted more. In June 1991, he agreed to surrender, but on his own terms. He would build his own prison, pay for it himself, and choose his own guards. No Colombian police were allowed within 12 miles of the facility. That's how La Catedral was born, but calling it a prison would be an insult. It was more like a private resort. Inside, Escobar had luxury suites, TVs, a personal library, bars, pool tables, and even a soccer field. Celebrities, soccer players, and models visited freely. Locked up? Not really. From inside La Catedral, Pablo Escobar kept running his empire. His cartel was still smuggling 15 tons of cocaine daily into the United States. Prison was just another business move for him. For months, Pablo Escobar lived like a king inside the prison he built for himself. He had luxury, power, and complete control. But when he tortured and killed 2 members of his own cartel, the government knew they had made a mistake. This wasn't a prison, it was his fortress. Realizing that Escobar's empire was still running without a problem, Colombian authorities decided to tighten their grip. On July 22, 1992, they launched an operation to move him to a real prison. But Escobar was always one step ahead. Before the forces even arrived, he had already escaped. His jailbreak was a disaster for the Colombian government. How could the most wanted man in the world walk away so easily? Desperate to catch him, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, joined forces with the Colombian police and military, creating a special task force called Search Block. They also put a 2.7 billion Colombian pesos bounty on his head, hoping someone would turn him in. At the same time, a rival group called Los Pepes was hunting him too. This wasn't the police. This was a brutal paramilitary group made up of his enemies, former cartel members, and families of his victims. This time, his money couldn't buy safety. For a year and a half, Escobar remained hidden, always on the move. But on December 1st, 1993, he made a mistake. He was celebrating his 44th birthday in a secret hideout and spent hours on the phone talking to his family. U.S. intelligence tracked his calls and found his exact location. The very next day, Colombian forces stormed the building. Escobar and his men ran across the rooftops, trying to escape. When police closed in, he opened fire, but there was no way out. In the gunfight, he was shot multiple times and died on the spot. Some say he took his own life, as he always claimed he would if caught. Whatever the truth, Pablo Escobar was gone. For the government, it was a victory. But at his funeral, 25,000 people mourned him. He was feared, hated, and admired. Even after his death, no one ever replaced him as the king of cocaine.